Sleep paralysis is a condition in which someone, most often lying on their back, and who is about to drop off to sleep, or just upon waking from sleep, realizes that he or she is unable to move, or speak, or even cry out. This may last a few seconds or several moments, occasionally even longer. People frequently report feeling a presence that is often described as malevolent, threatening, or even evil. An intense sense of dread and terror is very common. The presence is likely to be vaguely felt or sensed, just out of sight, but thought to be watching or monitoring, often with intense interest, sometimes standing by or sitting on the bed. On some occasions, the presence may attack, usually by strangling and exerting crushing pressure on the chest. People also report auditory, visual, and tactile hallucinations, as well as floating sensations and out-of-body experiences. The tactile and auditory hallucinations that are reported most often are buzzing, humming sounds, and the feeling of an electrical current throughout the body that is not painful. These various sensory experiences have been referred to collectively as hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. Hypnagogic hallucinations is experienced with closed eyes or in darkness. They proceed quietly and fleetingly. They are not usually felt or projected to be physically present in one's room as the experiencer drifts off to sleep. Hypnopompic hallucinations, on the other hand, are often seen with open eyes and bright illumination. They are frequently projected into external space and seem to be totally solid and real as the experiencer wakes up from his or her sleep. Some of the sleep paralysis hallucinatory experiences are described as being more real than real, accompanied by full awareness. After going through sleep paralysis attacks, many people are exhausted, covered in sweat, and afraid to go back to sleep. The sense presence is not a part of everyone's sleep paralysis experience. Moreover, those who do report the sense presence do not report having the experience every time. Even with no further information, many respondents appear to have an immediate intuition that the presence is someone or something to be feared. The presence is commonly interpreted as possessed of a malevolent, evil intent. The sense of evil is often made concrete by the experience of the presence as a devil, demon, or other inhuman, even unnatural creature. In some cases, there appears to be a blurring of sense presence and visual hallucinations. David J. Hufford, an expert and researcher into sleep paralysis, has documented many of the visual hallucinations and entities that people would report to him about. One woman mentioned to him an experience she had once, late at night, with a creature that looked like an ape with red glowing eyes in her bedroom. She had other symptoms like paralysis and a crushing weight on her chest. There are 4 stages for these entities to manifest themselves in cases of sleep paralysis. At first, you only feel the presence of someone else in the room. Next, you may actually see a darkened figure, or there may be mist or fog that coalesce into a dark figure. Finally, you may get a glimpse of what these entities look like. What do these entities look like? Accounts from past sufferers include descriptions of all kinds of entities, some being described as demonic beings, disfigured people, hooded figures with gleaming red or yellow eyes, the undead and zombies, and for some, people who once tortured or sexually abused them. Also reported are a thin white mist, an animal, bright simmering vaporous things, disembodied faces and flickering lights, or bright light, or other manifestations of these beings. In the final stage, the entity may make physical contact. It may put its hands on your throat or sit on your chest and smile in a wicked way. Some even report sexual assault by these beings. Sleep paralysis is even documented by Hufford and others as being connected to hauntings, poltergeist activities, and demonic infestations. Sleep paralysis experiences in the past were labeled the nightmare. The nightmare inspired a lot of stories and art during the late 1700s to around the 1800s. One work of art was of the famous painting by Henry Fuseli, depicting a voluptuous woman lying on her bed with a small demon-like creature sitting on her chest, with a black horse that has no pupils staring out through the curtain. You can find themes of sleep paralysis in the writings of Rasmus Darwin, Herman Melville, Guy de Maupassant, Thomas Hardy, and Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula. It is believed that the first physician and scientist to talk about sleep paralysis is from a man who went by the name of Polius Ageneta, who was a Byzantine Greek physician during the 17th century. Sleep paralysis, nightmares, and nocturnal attacks have been closely connected to myths and monsters across time and many different cultures. We will now go over a few of these myths and stories that feature themes of sleep paralysis across cultures throughout history. The phenomenon of sleep paralysis, or the nightmare, has been reported all the way back to ancient cultures. A demonic entity that comes to mind is that of Lilith, who along with hordes of her demons would attack men at night in their beds. Witches are believed to do something much similar according to the beliefs in some past cultures. They were believed to be able to transform themselves into animals, most often into screech owls, and attack people, mostly children, during the night in their beds. In the ancient Greek and Roman myths, you had stories of Hecate and her demonic associates. They would go into men's bedrooms at night and attack them, even giving them nightmares. These stories later got mixed in with stories of the incubus and succubus entities who attacked men and women during the night. In the Moldavia region of Romania, there is a vampiric spirit that is known as a Zimu. It is the only vampire that does not cast a reflection in a mirror. The Zimu looks like a flame. At night, this highly skilled lover visits young girls and widows, shapeshifting into the guise of a handsome young man. It then has sexual intercourse with them, stealing away their life energy. In Transylvanian lore, the Zimu uses its shapeshifting abilities to change into a lovely young woman in order to seduce shepherds, much like the succubus can do. Both fast and strong, the Zimu has an array of abilities that enables it to be a very successful predator, such as being able to cause hallucinations, desolidification, flight, and shapeshifting into a cloud of dust or mist. The Zimu can be killed if dealt an otherwise fatal blow with a silver weapon. Another vampiric entity connected to sleep paralysis is the Nosferatu. Heinrich von Woloski, in his researches into Romanian superstitions, tells us that the Nosferatu not only sucks the blood of sleeping people, but also does mischief as an incubus or succubus. The Nosferatu is the stillborn, illegitimate child of two people who are similarly illegitimate. It is hardly put under the earth before it awakens to life and leaves its grave never to return. It visits people by night in the form of a black cat, a black dog, a beetle, a butterfly, or even a simple stroll. When its sex is male, it visits women. When female, men. With young people, it indulges in sexual orgies until they get ill and die of exhaustion. In this case, it also appears in the form of a handsome youth, while the victim lies half awake and submits unresistingly. In Northern Europe, in the Republic of Estonia, the concept of a blood-drinking vampire was imported from the neighboring countries of Latvia, Finland, Russia, Sweden, and Ukraine. Calling this vampire a vampire, it entered silently into a person's home, lay on top of someone, and smothered him to death while he slept. It had the ability to shapeshift into a bat and a wolf. However, the vampire was only active a few hours each night and was susceptible to sunlight. Like many of the vampires that lived in neighboring countries, the vampire was killed either by burning it to ash, decapitation, or by hanging. Another vampiric entity connected to the phenomenon of sleep paralysis is that of the Alp. The Alp is an entity that is believed to be either a demon, a ghost, the undead, or even a wizard. It visits people at night and takes on the guise of a mist and crushes people's chests, giving them nightmares in the process. Here is a story concerning an Alp. It talks about a cabinet maker who slept in a bed at his workshop. For several nights, something would lay itself on his chest and pressed against him until he could hardly breathe. The next night, he lay awake in bed, and at the stroke of 12, a cat slipped in through a hole. The cabinet maker quickly stopped up the hole, caught the cat, and nailed down one of its paws. Then he went to sleep. The next morning, he found a beautiful naked woman in the cat's place, with one of her hands nailed down just like the cat's. She happened to please him so much that he married her. One day, after she bore him 3 children, she was with him in his workshop when he opened up the hole to free her and said to her that is where she came in from. The woman suddenly turned into a cat, ran out through the opening, and she was never seen again. This story of the cabinet maker starts off with sleep paralysis that then evolves into what I believe to be false awakenings and then into lucid dreams, both of which have close connections to the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. This story even has a strong connection to the succubus, which is a demon that takes on the form of a seductive woman to sleep with a man and produce hybrid offspring. We hear very similar themes in modern hauntings as well. In the ancient Scandinavian sagas, there are stories of old women who can turn into wolves, and through the power of their eyes, they can paralyze cattle and people at night. In Brazil, there is believed to be an entity called the Passadeira, who comes in the form of a gaunt old man or woman with long fingernails that lurks on the rooftops of those that this creature plans to attack as they sleep, and crushing their chests. In some areas of Brazil, the Pisaderia is described as being heavyset and on the fat side. There is also a northeastern name for the Pisaderia around the São Francisco River, the so-called Pisaderia. The Pisaderia is also described as being on the heavyset side that wears a red cap. It is believed that if someone can snatch the red cap from this entity, it will lose all her strength and will grant any wish in return for her cap. In Algarve, the Passaderia is described as a friar with a red cap, who enters people's homes at night through the door keyhole. Upon entering their bedrooms, he ends up straddling them, giving them nightmares in their sleep. In Catalonia, there is an entity known as the Pensanta. The Pensanta is a black animal, usually a dog or a cat, that invades houses at night and steps over people's chests, disturbing their breath and causing nightmares, similar to the Passaderia. The Pensanta are also documented as having holes in their hands. The Eskimos living in Canada's subarctic region believe in a certain group of humans that are shamans who cast spells on their opponents. One type of spell is known as the Ukaman Gurnik, which is when the victim is put under sleep paralysis and ends up seeing shapeless or faceless entities. During the 1970s, the United States received many Cambodian refugees and observed a high incidence of sleep paralysis among survivors of the Pol Pot dictatorial regime. 42% of the subjects reported at least one sleep paralysis episode per year. These individuals refer to sleep paralysis as Kamoch Sankat, which means the ghost that pushes you down. According to them, it is a supernatural being, or a ghost, that would put their hands on the chest or neck of the victim while sleeping, making it difficult to breathe. There are 4 ways these supernatural beings could look like. 1, as a tall black shadow lacking a defined outline. 2, as a red-eyed, canine-toothed being, dressed in a Khmer Rouge cloak, who brandishes a knife or club. 3, as a simian-like demon. 4. As an act, which is a grotesque creature with only the head of a woman and her bowels. Regarding these ghosts, when someone is killed violently or buried without the proper funeral rites, something recurrent during the Pol Pot period, their spirit would be doomed to walk the earth and haunt the living. In the Middle East, there is the belief in a supernatural race of very powerful magical beings, known as the jinn. In many regions in the Middle East is the belief that the jinn can attack people at night with a crushing weight on the chest and causing nightmares. They even behave in much the same ways as the incubus and succubus demons, along with that of other vampire-type beings in European legends. Modern accounts of sleep paralysis fit into a pattern as documented by some well-known paranormal and dream researchers. They state that these modern-day accounts usually start off with people seeing shadow people and or shadow-like forms in mist that materialize and sometimes transform into monsters and other entities. I want to go over these types of monsters and other entities that the phenomenon appears as when it interacts with people. Number 1 on this list are: Number 1. Demons. Demonic-like entities that we label demons feature heavily in accounts of sleep paralysis, both in ancient and in modern times. In one modern account, there is the case concerning an individual named Jeremy. It was during a period of turmoil that the demonic figure that would haunt Jeremy for years to come first appeared to him in a dream. On the night of the first visitation, Jeremy had fallen asleep in his room watching television, as he was prone to do, when he was suddenly awakened by the sound of breaking glass. Startled by the commotion, he tried to sit up in bed, but found that he couldn't move a muscle. Fearing that someone had broken into the house, he tried to yell for his parents, but no sound came out. Sensing that he wasn't alone, he scanned the area with his eyes in an attempt to get a look at the intruder. Although he couldn't see anyone, he did notice 2 lights glowing from across the room. As he watched helplessly, the lights moved closer. Within seconds, he could see that the glowing orbs were the eyes of a massive creature with curled horns like that of a ram, and a wide mouth that stretched from one side of its head to the other. As it glared down at the terrified boy, the monstrosity flicked its tongue in and out of its mouth, as if tasting his fear. Although he didn't know what exactly had invaded his room, Jeremy's thought at the time was that it was the devil himself. The only thing that made him question this was that the beast wasn't red, as he imagined the devil to be. Instead, its glistening skin reminded him of an oily black canvas sprinkled with silver glitter. When the demonic entity bent down over Jeremy, he could feel its hot breath on his face. Bracing himself for the worst, he closed his eyes, not wanting to see what this horrible thing was going to do next. As the teenager prepared to be annihilated, the demon let out a bellowing laugh that was so loud that he was certain it would wake the entire house. While Jeremy waited for his parents to come to his rescue, the creature began to slowly back away from the bed. It then turned and waved its hand through the air, as if it was making something disappear. Here is another account about an experience that an individual had with a demon that goes by the name of the Papabawa. This individual heard a sound like a clock's alarm, and when he awoke and looked, he saw a tiny dog in the bedroom, and on the dog's head were rotating lights, like from an ambulance. The dog then starts to grow in size, and at the same time starts to spin around in a circle. And as it starts to spin faster and faster, the lights on its head get bigger and bigger. The guy is paralyzed and cannot move his mouth to scream. This man's son runs into his bedroom, possessed by a spirit, and tells this growing, rotating dog to leave. And as he told it to leave, this dog then turned into a man that was so large that you could not see his face or even his shoulders. It was a giant in the bedroom. Number 2. Giant spiders and other like entities. People with sleep paralysis report seeing normal-sized black spiders. Sometimes they are described as very big. and in a few cases, they're even described as taking up the whole ceiling of your bedroom. This one person documented that they woke up from a dream one morning and saw on the ceiling an impossibly huge 2-foot wide spider that ended up disappearing as it was crawling towards them. This individual was paralyzed in bed as they witnessed all this. Another documented account mentioned this person who felt something that was on the side of their leg slowly crawling up. This individual woke up fast and then realized that they couldn't move. More stuff started to crawl up this person's legs, and faster too. Soon enough, this individual felt most of their legs covered by many undefined critters, and they were making their way up, and with the speed increasing every second. They made their way up to this individual's lower torso, arms, chest, and neck. This person was just staring up at the ceiling and can't even blink at this point. They are then starting to go onto this person's face, and fast. Then this person's eyes. They go into the eyes and this individual can't even move. It's then that this person starts to realize that they are spiders. Bigger ones start going now, and really fast. More and more of them keep coming until this individual becomes a highway for spiders, just speeding up this person's body who cannot even close their eyes. Then it just stops. No other spiders scuttle up this person's body, and the ones that were on got off. This individual ended up laying there for a few minutes, just unable to do anything, who then ended up fainting after all this. Number 3. The Old Hag Entity. One of the most common apparitions of sleep paralysis is that of the Old Hag. Sightings of this particular dark presence date back centuries. She is most often described as a witch who perches atop the victim's chest, effectively restricting their ability to breathe. While under her spell, the sleeper can neither move nor speak. She is often described as being an evil-looking old woman who torments her victims, who is even still reported by sufferers of sleep paralysis in more recent times. And one modern-day account brings up a case of this woman who was stirred awake into sleep paralysis by a mysterious figure that was lurking in the doorway leading into her room. Although she couldn't make out the intruder's features, what she could see reminded her of a witch from a scary storybook. As she stared transfixed at the shadowy form, it began moving towards her, stopping when it reached the side of the bed. Sensing that she was in trouble, she tried to scream, but no sound came out. As she lay motionless, the witch bent down and began to whisper in her ear. About a month after the first incident, the witch's amusing mutterings were replaced by screams so shrill and unexpected that the woman's prior indifference shifted to abject terror. In an effort to shield herself from the onslaught, she had closed her eyes as the witch shrieked directly into her face. Only then did it become clear to her that the visits were not friendly after all. The witch's vocalizations weren't the only thing that had changed. On this occasion, instead of simply hovering nearby, the night hag had positioned itself on her chest, rendering her helpless. The longer that this went on, the harder it was for her to breathe. At some point during the ordeal, the screaming stopped, replaced by maniacal laughter. She relates that, just as she was about to pass out, the weight lifted and the room fell silent. When she opened her eyes, the witch was nowhere to be seen. Another account is of a person whose earliest memory that they have of sleep paralysis is around the age of 12. This person was having a dream which turned dark, the skies, the theme, the general tone blackened, and this individual felt a sharp jab in their ribs. This person's eyes opened to a very old, ugly woman sitting directly on their chest, making it impossible for them to breathe. This person was frozen completely, couldn't blink or move at all. At some point, they snapped out of it and stayed awake for the rest of the night, scared out of their mind. Number 4. The Hat Man. The Hat Man is another entity that people report encountering during sleep paralysis episodes. He is described as a tall black silhouette of a man with a hat and who has no discernible features, but yet people can sense that he is watching them with intensity. When people do see him with discernible features, they describe him as having a pale face with a sinister, gigantic smile that has razor-sharp teeth. His eyes are usually solid black, sometimes solid red or white that might glow. He wears hats from different time periods, but usually either a fedora or top hat and a cape. He is also described as sometimes stepping out of a shadow form, as if it were cloaking him. It is also documented that he controls a whole host of other shadow-like entities and monsters to do his bidding. In one case of sleep paralysis involved an individual who had a dream of the Hat Man. In the dream, this person was in the upstairs of a home and had an overwhelming urge to look through a floor grate into the basement. This individual got down on their hands and knees and peered through the grate, only to see a black shadow man with a black hat sitting on the basement floor. His body was not well defined and almost blurry. However, he had glowing red eyes that were fixed on this individual who was watching him. This person started to feel a sense of impending doom, and when they wanted to confront the Hat Man, they ended up waking from the dream. Later on in life, this individual had recurring dreams where the lights in a basement or bathroom suddenly dim to a dull orange glow or turn off completely. During these moments, this person sensed the presence of pure evil, emanating from a pitch-black corner of the room. Overcome with an uncontrollable urge, he began walking towards the evil. As he gets closer, he ends up losing control of his body, and his legs start marching faster and faster towards the darkness under the command of this evil force. Breathing harder and harder with each step, this individual tries to scream for help, but no sound comes out besides his hyperventilating breaths. Fortunately, his wife always wakes him up from this terrifying experience. On another occasion, while sleeping in his in-law's guest bedroom, he had a horrifying sleep paralysis dream encounter. He laid in bed, contemplating getting up to join his wife in the living room, when suddenly he heard a demonic voice coming from the floor to his left. The strange thing was, he couldn't turn over to see what it was because he was completely paralyzed, lying on his back. The evil presence, represented by the demonic voice speaking in an incomprehensible language, seemed to move clockwise around the bed, starting from the foot before reaching his right ear. The one time he remembers that when he was 4 years old, he had a terrifying dream. In this dream, he woke up in the middle of the night in his bed, unable to turn on the lights, and saw a pure evil version of his 4-year-old self jumping on the bed, taunting him. Once again, he could feel the evil presence. Evil has plagued his dreams throughout his entire life, with the Hat Man appearing only once. Number 5. ETs and UFOs. Cases of UFO and alien abductions have been claimed to feature sleep paralysis, and those cases are not unfounded. People usually report being abducted almost anywhere at any time, but in most cases at nighttime in their bedrooms. In all the cases, it starts off with sensing a presence, hearing a humming or buzzing sound, feeling an electrical or vibrational sensation throughout their body, and being unable to move, all being characteristics of sleep paralysis. Then a bright light comes in and fills up the whole room, or people see orbs of light come in, and out of the brightly lit room or orb, an entity will manifest itself to appear and levitate the paralyzed abductee through a solid window into what is believed to be a spaceship. The entities that people report seeing are mostly the big head, short gray types, known as the Greys, who are described as having big, almond-shaped, black eyes that have a hypnotic quality to them, just like some of the beings in sleep paralysis are claimed to also have as well. The other entities connected to the UFO abduction experience that are seen as well are reptilian or giant praying mantis type creatures, Nordic beings, beings of light, and strange people, creatures and animals, with some of these animals being reported as having big black eyes that talk telepathically to people, which upon being further investigated through hypnosis, allegedly uncovers the real appearance behind these animals, the real appearance being that of the Greys. One abductee had a sleep paralysis experience where she documented a realistic dream of being on a grassy hillside, being unable to move, and hearing a high-pitched buzzing sound, and saw a bright light around her. She ended up seeing a small speck in the sky that spiraled down toward her. As the object came closer, it appeared to be an owl. She then turned her head and saw a shaman watching her. Then she reported that she started to feel a heavy weight pressed down upon her chest. An abduction investigator who investigated this woman's claims of contact had her do a relaxation exercise to relive this particular experience more clearly. It was allegedly a misperception or false memory of a UFO ET abduction case. These UFO entities, it is believed, give people a false memory or even a misperception of themselves as animals like deer, birds, cats, and so on. However, one of the favorite forms that this phenomenon likes to disguise itself as is that of the owl. Interestingly enough, the owl has been closely connected to Lilith, who I mentioned earlier, and her nighttime demons. The owl has even been the favorite form of the vampire witches in folklore that I also discussed earlier. Like vampires and vampire witches, the UFO phenomenon has even been linked to the draining of energy, blood loss, and cattle mutilations, with no blood left in the cattle. All this sounds too eerily like the vampire legends of the past, which, like the UFO phenomenon, is even strongly linked to sleep paralysis. Throughout history, people have come up with different explanations for the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Mostly it was blamed on the supernatural realm. Writing at around the 13th century, Gervase of Tilbury said that doctors have stated that entities of sleep paralysis like the Lamias and witches and so on are nothing but nightmares, which are nocturnal imaginations that disturb the minds of sleepers and oppress with weight, which was what they called for sleep paralysis during that time period. There have been some accounts where sleep paralysis has been contagious, meaning more than one individual has an experience with the same entity. A case example in point is documented by Dr. Laurent, a French battlefield surgeon. He reported on an entire regiment being overcome by the nightmare, also known as sleep paralysis. This event occurred after a lengthy forced march ended with the men garrisoning in the small town of Tropea. They experienced little comfortable rest that night due to overcrowding in the makeshift barracks, which coincidentally was also a monastery with a local reputation for being haunted. Many of the soldiers awoke in the middle of the night to find themselves suffocated by what they described as a large black dog, who ended up disappearing suddenly, and as a result of this experience, many men left the barracks screaming. If these claims are true, it may then be possible that a combination of the forced march and the uncomfortable bedrooms served to dysregulate sleep patterns and encourage frequent awakenings during the night. Both of these situations make sleep paralysis more likely to happen. They also could have generated the group hallucination of the large black dog as well. There is even the claim that these shared hallucinations are derived from an euphemisma, which is some form of redolent bad air which can predispose groups of people to the nightmare. Sleep paralysis condition. Interestingly enough, sleep paralysis is strongly connected to the realm of dreams, and people have shared the same dream environment in some cases, where basically they are both in the same dream landscape together, interacting in many situations with the same dream characters. And if conditions are right and they both are under sleep paralysis, then it is very likely that the dream characters or environment can spill over into the waking world as a group hallucination. There are even some experiments that strongly suggest that maybe you can influence people's dreams and hypnagogia experiences through telepathy, which is where an individual sends a thought or a sensation over to someone else's mind and gives them one of these types of experiences. The phenomenon of sleep paralysis itself might even have an objectiveness to it in some cases. In other words, being intelligent life forms out there that are real and only perceived under certain states, sleep paralysis being one of those states. A man by the name of Trevor James Constable, who was an early communications expert of sorts, became a medium to and communicated with UFO intelligences during the late 1950s, and was told by them that they are of a different vibratory energy that is normally invisible to human sight, that in order to see them and other invisible life forms, you have to use infrared film at certain times under certain conditions. Constable claims to have used infrared film to photograph these invisible life forms, some of them small, others monstrously large, like elementals of various kinds, serpent-looking creatures, fish-like and atmospheric jellyfish forms. Interestingly enough, another individual by the name of Robert Monroe had an experience with what he described as astral parasitic suckerfish during one of his out-of-body experiences, which were documented in his book titled Journeys. He also had a few sleep paralysis encounters, which were the precursor to some of his out-of-body experiences. In the late 1970s, Constable received a letter from a UFO researcher in Genoa, Italy, by the name of Signor Bassone, who explained to Constable how he and his team of researchers had managed to capture, independently of Constable, identical photographs of biological UFOs and other entities. In his letter to Constable, Bassone wrote that their photographs also showed invisible, glowing, pulsating plasma organisms, capable of changing shape, size, density, luminosity, and so on, in a split second. The photographs also showed them fleeing in the sky at tremendous speed. When they land, they sometimes are in the form of spheres of light, which subsequently transmute in a fraction of a second either into glowing, ectoplasmic, demon-like entities, or into airspews of light skimming over the ground, or into corporeal, haloed human-like entities. What Constable and Bassone have caught and seen on infrared film, people also under sleep paralysis tend to see as well. Both feature floating orbs of light, mist and lights, demon-like figures, and so on. What is also interesting is that many alleged hauntings also feature light orbs and mist. Even group sightings of Marian apparitions happen to feature them as well. Maybe what is truly being seen in some, maybe all of the cases, is fear itself. Fear itself being the unknown that we clothe in frightening forms to best understand what we are seeing and feeling. As H.P. Lovecraft, the famous cosmic horror writer, once said, quote, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown," end quote. When people tend to see these entities under sleep paralysis, they are usually drifting into or coming out of their sleep. Both usually feature closed eyes, where they were in a realm of darkness, where the dream realm gazes at and interacts with them. As a man by the name of Frederick Nietzsche once stated, "If you gaze for long into an abyss, the abyss gazes also into you."